It is about how, inside walls built to contain men, sometimes the worst violence comes not from outside enemies, but from within. This documentary centers on a crime within a crime, a homicide inside a prison weight room. A place where men come to build strength, lift heavy iron, and contend with their own humanity. A place meant to burn off tension under fluorescent lights and clang of steel plates. Yet on one morning in late November 1994, at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin, the prison's gym, with its dumbbells, benches, weight bars, and concrete floors, became the scene of unthinkable violence. To understand how a man convicted of multiple murders ended up dead in that gym, we must first step back into the concrete world of an American penitentiary, a place of contradictions where routine and chaos live side by side. Columbia Correctional Institution is a maximum security facility. High brick walls loom over asphalt yards. Razor wire crowns fences that never sleep. Inside, steel doors and grated windows divide cell blocks, work areas, and common spaces. For inmates, life here is measured in counts, chow lines, and chore times. Movement is regulated by clocks, keys, and voices over the loudspeaker. And amid all this, there is a gym. Incarcerated men arrive at the gym with shackled wrists, dressed in institutional jumpsuits or gym shorts. On any given morning, the room can be packed, inmates warming up on treadmills, doing incline presses, curling dumbbells, stretching near the mats. Some come alone. Others gather in groups. Conversations are minimal, reserved. Eyes assess, measure, gauge. The weight room is one of the few places where physical power and survival instincts are laid bare. Here, big men bench press beneath bar-loaded racks. Smaller men test their resilience on rows, pull-ups, or weighted sit-ups. The clang of metal collars, the drop of plates on rubber mats, these are the rhythms of a place where inmates chase control in an environment designed to strip away control. But this gym was no refuge. It was a flashpoint. On the morning of November 28, 1994, two high-profile inmates walked into that gym with another man, Christopher J. Scarver. Scarver was serving a life sentence for murder. He was a large, strong, and troubled man, someone officers described as difficult and unpredictable. That morning, he, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jesse Anderson were assigned to a work detail together in the gym. Work details are common in prisons, inmates assigned to sweep floors, clean equipment, or handle laundry. On most mornings, correctional officers supervise these tasks and ensure no inmate strays from the assignment. But this time, for reasons that would later be debated by authorities and psychologists alike, the officers left them unattended for a short stretch. A small group of men, unguarded in a gym surrounded by weight racks and concrete walls, a dangerous combination under the best circumstances, and an explosive one under the worst. Jeffrey Dahmer was one of the most notorious criminals in modern American history. Convicted of multiple murders, crimes so grotesque they transfixed the nation, Dahmer was despised within the inmate population. Stories of his crimes, of necrophilia, dismemberment, and cannibalism, had followed him into prison. Many inmates saw him as beyond redemption, beyond rehabilitation, beyond the already thin lines of honor among criminals. Jesse Anderson, too, was a murderer, serving time for killing his wife. He was not a household name like Dahmer, but he was known among inmates and officers as a violent offender. Christopher Scarver, by contrast, was a self-described follower of a personal moral code influenced by religion and rage. He had been involved in earlier violent acts in prison and had a history of mental health issues. The intersection of these three men, their histories, reputations, animosities, created a volatile situation. That morning in the gym, the atmosphere was tense even before the violence began. The three men moved into the area of the building where cleaning supplies were stored and where heavier gym equipment, including weight bars and dumbbells, were kept. Concrete floors, high ceilings, and fluorescent lights framed the space. Then, in a sequence that would be reconstructed later by investigators, Scarver went to a rack of weight bars. These long, heavy metal rods, intended to hold plates for squats or bench presses, became weapons that morning. In the absence of supervision, he selected a bar roughly 20 inches long, a piece of iron usually reserved for curls or upper body exercises, and made it lethal. Scarver struck Dahmer repeatedly. Each blow connected with brutal force and intent. The bar struck Dahmer's head, face, and skull with bone-crunching impact. The noise of metal on flesh echoed in the concrete gym like a grotesque percussion. Dahmer collapsed to the floor, his body motionless, blood spreading across the gray institutional surface. Scarver did not stop. Then Scarver turned his violence toward Jesse Anderson. Anderson was cleaning another part of the gym, his back likely turned, unaware of how quickly the violence would escalate. Scarver attacked him with a wooden stick or bar, striking him again and again with unrelenting force. Anderson fell, screaming. Men who had been nearby scattered. All this happened in less than a minute, but for those present, the moment stretched into eternity. By the time officers returned or reinforcements arrived, Dahmer lay on the cold floor bleeding, unconscious. Anderson was alive but gravely injured. Correctional officers pressed red buttons, called in the emergency, and secured the area. They summoned paramedics. Within an hour, Dahmer was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Anderson would succumb to his injuries 2 days later. The weight room, a place meant for structured exertion and physical conditioning, had become a killing field. The dumbbells and bars that once symbolized strength now lay scattered in a pool of blood and fear. There were questions: how could this have happened? Why was supervision absent? What intelligence, if any, could have predicted this breakdown? Was it a failure of protocol or a reminder that sometimes, even within cages and bars, violence cannot be fully contained? The state of Wisconsin authorities later assessed Scarver for mental competency. He entered a plea that ultimately led to convictions for the murders of Dahmer and Anderson, receiving additional life sentences. But the incident also exposed deeper truths about life inside maximum security prisons. Prison administrators had to confront a reality everyone knew but rarely acknowledged, that in the confined, pressure cooker world of high-security incarceration, everyday spaces can become arenas of conflict. A gym is not simply a place to work out. It is a locus of power struggles, grudges, reputations, survival. In the weight room that day, there were no guards to see the first blow. No warning lights. No rapid response teams. There were only iron bars, sweat stains on rubber mats, and 3 men whose lives had intersected in the most violent way possible. The echoes of that moment would ripple through the institution for years to come. Inmate routines were scrutinized, supervision protocols reviewed, and officers were reminded, even the ordinary can become deadly in a prison. This story, The Crime Within the Gym, is not just about the act. It is about the environment that produced it. Before the first blow was struck in the gym at Columbia Correctional Institution, the violence had already taken shape in quieter, less visible ways. Power inside a maximum security prison does not announce itself with noise. It settles into routines, reputations, glances, and unspoken rules. To understand why the gym became lethal that morning, we must understand the men inside it, and how power flowed between them. Columbia Correctional Institution housed a population that included some of the most violent offenders in Wisconsin. This was not a place for first-time inmates or short sentences. Many men here were serving life terms. They lived with the certainty that the outside world was gone for good. In that environment, reputation becomes currency. Respect is protection. Weakness, once detected, spreads quickly. The gym sat at the intersection of these forces. It was one of the few spaces where inmates could physically assert themselves without immediate confrontation. Strength mattered. Presence mattered. Who lifted the most weight, who commanded the benches during peak hours, who moved without apology, these details were noticed. Jeffrey Dahmer entered this environment carrying one of the heaviest reputations imaginable. Even among murderers, Dahmer was different. His crimes had been broadcast across national media. The details, disturbing, sensational, unforgettable, followed him into prison like a shadow. Inmates talked. Guards knew. Word traveled faster than paperwork ever could. In the prison hierarchy, notoriety can sometimes be protection. But Dahmer's notoriety worked against him. His crimes violated the few remaining moral boundaries that exist even among convicted criminals. He was not seen as just another offender. He was seen as something other, an outcast among outcasts. By most accounts, Dahmer tried to navigate prison life quietly. He avoided direct confrontation. He worked assigned jobs. He participated in programs. But avoidance does not erase reputation. Every move he made was watched. Every interaction was filtered through what inmates believed about him. Some inmates reported that Dahmer made inappropriate jokes or comments, leaning into his infamy as a form of dark humor. Others said he kept to himself. What is clear is this: he was not respected, and he was not protected. In a place like Colombia, that combination is dangerous. Jesse Anderson occupied a different position. He was convicted of murdering his wife, a crime that also carried stigma within the inmate population. Domestic violence offenders are often targeted inside prison, viewed as cowardly or dishonorable compared to other violent crimes. Anderson was not powerful. He did not command influence. He did not have a crew. Like Dahmer, he existed on the margins. Then there was Christopher Scarver. Scarver was physically imposing. Tall. Muscular. His body told a story of time spent lifting weights, of adapting to the prison's physical culture. He was not merely strong, he was visibly strong. Tattoos covered his arms and torso. His posture communicated readiness. His presence was noticed when he entered a room. But Scarver's power did not come from muscle alone. It came from volatility. He had a documented history of violence and mental instability. He was known to fixate on ideas, to interpret events through a personal moral framework shaped by religion, anger, and delusion. He believed he had a mission. In prison, belief systems can be as dangerous as weapons. Scarver was not aligned with any major prison gang, but he did not need to be. Lone actors can be unpredictable, and unpredictability commands a certain kind of fear. Inmates gave him space. Officers monitored him closely, though not closely enough, as events would later show. The dynamic between these three men was not one of equals. It was asymmetrical. Dahmer and Anderson were isolated. Scarver was dominant. On the morning of November 28, 1994, they were assigned together for a work detail in the gym. That decision alone raised questions afterward. Work details are supposed to consider compatibility and risk. Pairing vulnerable inmates with volatile ones, especially in an area filled with potential weapons, violated the spirit, if not the letter, of safety protocols. Inside the gym, power dynamics sharpen. The gym amplifies hierarchy. Physicality is on display. There is no place to hide weakness when weights are being lifted and bodies are measured against each other. For someone like Scarver, the gym reinforced his sense of dominance. For someone like Dahmer, it underscored vulnerability. Witnesses later described Scarver as agitated that morning. His movements were abrupt. His demeanor was tense. He reportedly felt disrespected by comments or behavior from Dahmer, whether real or perceived. In prison, perception is often enough. Scarver believed Dahmer mocked him. He believed Dahmer made light of his crimes. Whether these beliefs were accurate mattered less than the fact that Scarver accepted them as truth. And once a belief takes root in a confined environment, it grows. The officers supervising the area had routines to follow. They were stretched thin. The gym was considered a controlled space during work detail hours. That assumption, control through routine, proved catastrophic. For a short window, Scarver, Dahmer, and Anderson were left alone. In that moment, power became absolute. Scarver was stronger. Scarver was angrier. Scarver believed he was justified. Dahmer and Anderson had no leverage, no allies, no escape routes, no authority to appeal to. The gym's layout worked against them: open floor, hard surfaces, heavy equipment. Power inside prison is often described as informal, but that morning it was brutally concrete. Scarver did not need to threaten. He did not need to posture. The environment itself sided with him. Weight bars leaned against racks. Dumbbells rested within reach. Every object became an extension of force. This is how violence often emerges in prison, not as a sudden eruption, but as the inevitable outcome of unchecked imbalance. After the incident, investigators would analyze Scarver's psychological state. He spoke of divine motivation. He spoke of justice. He spoke of being compelled to act. These explanations were examined in courtrooms and psychiatric evaluations. But inside the prison, explanations were simpler. Scarver was dangerous. Dahmer was hated. Anderson was expendable. That does not make the crime inevitable, but it makes it understandable within the prison's internal logic. Power dynamics inside incarceration are rarely about formal authority. They are about who can act without consequence. That morning, Scarver believed consequences did not apply to him. Serving life already, additional punishment carried little deterrent value. This is a reality corrections officials quietly acknowledge: for inmates with nothing left to lose, violence becomes easier to rationalize. The gym, with its dumbbells and bars, removed the final barrier: the need for preparation. The weapons were already there. When the officers returned to the scene, they encountered not just the aftermath of a crime, but the collapse of a system that relies on separation, supervision, and control. The power dynamic had inverted. Inmates had dictated the outcome. Authority arrived too late. Understanding this chapter is essential because the killing was not random. It was the product of reputation, isolation, unchecked dominance, and an environment that magnified imbalance. In the next chapter, we will reconstruct the crime itself, minute by minute. Not to sensationalize it, but to understand how quickly order disintegrates when power is left unattended inside a prison gym. The institutional textures of confinement, the latent tensions among prisoners, the routines that can suddenly unravel, and the human cost when they do. The morning of November 28, 1994, at Columbia Correctional Institution's gym began like any other. Inmates arrived for their assigned work detail, cleaning, organizing equipment, and using the space to maintain physical strength. But within this ordinary routine, tension simmered, invisible yet palpable. On this day, the weight room would transform from a place of exertion into a scene of lethal violence. Christopher Scarver, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jesse Anderson entered the gym together. Scarver carried himself with a noticeable presence: broad shoulders, visible tattoos, and a controlled, deliberate gait. Dahmer followed with a quieter, withdrawn demeanor. He moved cautiously, aware of the scrutiny of both officers and inmates. Anderson, cleaning supplies in hand, stayed near the perimeter, attempting to avoid eye contact and conflict. The gym was bright but harshly lit, fluorescent lights overhead casting sharp shadows across the rubber flooring and concrete walls. Dumbbells, weight bars, benches, and racks were arranged throughout the room. The clang of metal against metal, the scent of sweat, and the dull echo of boots against concrete created an atmosphere charged with tension. Scarver's focus shifted almost immediately. Observers later recounted that he appeared agitated, muttering under his breath. Some officers later testified that he seemed to perceive mockery or disrespect from Dahmer, whether real or imagined. In the enclosed space of the gym, these perceptions became magnified. The first confrontation was subtle. Scarver moved toward a rack of weight bars. He selected a solid iron bar, roughly 20 inches long, usually used for bicep curls. In his hands, the bar was no longer exercise equipment, it became a weapon. His muscles tensed as he assessed his targets. Dahmer, unaware of the exact timing, was adjusting his bench press position. Anderson continued to clean the floor, seemingly oblivious. Scarver approached Dahmer from a short distance. The first blow struck the back of Dahmer's head. The impact echoed against the concrete walls, startling both inmates and staff. Dahmer staggered but remained upright, his hands instinctively moving toward his head. The bar struck again, this time with full force to the skull. Blood began to appear almost immediately, dampening Dahmer's prison-issue clothing and slicking the rubber mat below him. The attack was swift and brutal. Scarver delivered multiple strikes with calculated force, each one breaking the rhythm of the gym, shattering the illusion of routine. Witnesses later reported that Dahmer never had a chance to defend himself. He fell to the floor, unconscious, as Scarver's aggression did not abate. Anderson, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to intervene or flee. Scarver's attention shifted, and Anderson became the next target. Scarver picked up a wooden stick, one of the cleaning implements stored near the gym, and swung with relentless force. Anderson tried to evade, but the confined space left little room for escape. The stick connected multiple times, causing severe injuries. Anderson's screams filled the gym, mingling with the metallic clang of scattered dumbbells. During the assault, the gym's layout amplified Scarver's power. Weight benches obstructed escape routes, and the scattered equipment created hazards for anyone attempting to flee. Fluorescent lights flickered above, casting stark shadows that highlighted every motion, every strike. Scarver moved methodically, almost with purpose, ensuring his victims could not retaliate. The first officers returned to the gym after responding to an earlier signal. They arrived seconds too late to prevent the initial attacks. The scene they encountered was chaotic, Dahmer lying motionless on the rubber mat, blood pooling beneath him, Anderson bleeding heavily, barely conscious, and Scarver standing over them, bar in hand, breathing heavily, his face a mask of controlled fury. Officers immediately intervened. Scarver did not resist arrest but made no effort to hide his actions. They separated the men and called for emergency medical assistance. Dahmer was transported to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Anderson survived for only 2 more days before succumbing to his injuries. The aftermath of the attack highlighted critical failures in supervision, but it also underscored the inevitability of violence under certain prison conditions. Scarver had been left alone with 2 men who were socially isolated, notorious, and lacking allies. The environment of the gym, combined with the physical dominance and mental state of Scarver, created a situation in which lethal force could be applied with near certainty of success. Investigators later reconstructed the attack using witness testimonies, physical evidence, and Scarver's own confessions. The sequence was clear: first strike to Dahmer's head with the iron bar, successive blows until collapse, then a rapid shift to Anderson with the wooden stick. The tools intended for weightlifting and cleaning were transformed into weapons. The confined space, concrete surfaces, and unmonitored floor plan made the attacks more effective. Scarver's motive, while debated in court, was framed by his own statements, a combination of moral judgment, resentment, and anger toward Dahmer and Anderson. The perception of disrespect, amplified by prison culture and the lack of protective structures for the victims, culminated in one of the most infamous inmate-on-inmate killings in recent U.S. prison history. Within minutes, the gym returned to a semblance of normalcy, though the consequences were permanent. Correctional officers cordoned off the area, documenting the scene, collecting evidence, and debriefing staff and inmates. The weight room, once filled with routine and exertion, was now a documented crime scene. Dumbbells lay scattered, bars rested where they had struck flesh, and blood stains marked the floor. This minute-by-minute reconstruction reveals a sobering reality: in the closed ecosystem of a maximum security prison, violence can emerge with astonishing speed when power, perception, and opportunity intersect. Scarver's attack was not a spontaneous outburst of random aggression, it was the result of environmental conditions, inmate dynamics, and psychological pressures colliding in a space designed for physicality, not safety. The gym, its dumbbells and weight bars, the concrete floors, and fluorescent lighting, all became silent witnesses to the event. And while the institution responded with arrests and additional life sentences, the incident left a lasting mark on Columbia Correctional Institution, reshaping protocols, surveillance, and the way inmates were assigned to potentially volatile situations. Understanding this moment, in its full chronological and spatial context, is critical not only for historical documentation but for evaluating the structural failures that allowed it to occur. In the controlled chaos of a maximum security prison, even a few unmonitored minutes can be fatal. The sound of alarm bells echoed through Columbia Correctional Institution. Within moments of the attack, officers rushed into the gym, their footsteps heavy against the concrete floors. The scene they encountered was chaotic, 2 men severely injured, 1 already lifeless, blood pooling across the rubber mats, and scattered gym equipment that had transformed ordinary weights and benches into instruments of death. Jeffrey Dahmer lay motionless, his body marked by the brutal force of repeated blows. Jesse Anderson, gravely wounded, struggled to remain conscious, his breathing shallow and labored. Christopher Scarver, still holding the weight bar in his hands, did not resist. His presence dominated the space, but the officers quickly restrained him, ushering him out as the emergency protocol began. Correctional staff immediately initiated lockdown procedures. Steel doors slammed behind officers and inmates alike. Count times were accelerated. Every hallway, every block, was sealed to prevent further violence. In the gym, the air was heavy with fear and disbelief. Inmates froze in place, some crouched behind benches, while others stared silently, processing the sudden eruption of lethal force. The reality of prison violence had never been more immediate or undeniable. Medical personnel arrived swiftly. Dahmer was transported to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Anderson, critically injured, would survive only for a few more days. Scarver was escorted to a separate holding area, his demeanor calm yet resolute, as though the act had been preordained in his own mind. Within the prison walls, the incident sent shockwaves. Inmates who had witnessed the attack firsthand were placed on observation, questioned for intelligence, and moved away from potential flashpoints. Guards who had been responsible for supervising the gym faced scrutiny for the lapse in oversight that allowed the incident to occur. The weight room itself was cordoned off. Blood-stained mats and scattered dumbbells remained as evidence, a stark reminder of how quickly routine can collapse into fatality. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows over the scene, emphasizing the cold, unforgiving nature of prison spaces. Even after the immediate danger had passed, the sense of vulnerability lingered. Inmates and staff alike understood that one moment of inattention, one misjudged placement of individuals, could result in irreversible consequences. The fear was not limited to the gym. News of the incident spread quickly throughout Columbia Correctional Institution. Inmates speculated on motives, alliances, and possible retaliation. The prison's hierarchy, already tense, faced a sudden recalibration. The incident exposed vulnerabilities in both human and procedural structures, emphasizing the delicate balance required to maintain order. Psychologists and prison officials would later describe the attack as a convergence of factors: Scarver's physical dominance and mental instability, the victim's social isolation, the absence of supervision, and the environment itself. The gym, designed for controlled exertion, had become a lethal stage. In the hours and days that followed, security protocols were revised. Work details were reorganized to prevent high-risk pairings, and supervision was heightened in all areas containing potential weapons. Inmates and staff were reminded that in maximum security prisons, even a familiar, routine environment can become deadly when human psychology and opportunity collide. The immediate aftermath of the gym assault serves as a chilling case study in prison dynamics. It is a reminder that power, perception, and isolation, when combined with inadequate oversight, can produce outcomes that no procedure or protocol can fully prevent. The physical environment, a confined gym with heavy equipment and concrete surfaces, amplified the danger, making it tragically clear that the wrong conditions can transform a place of routine exercise into a scene of fatal violence.